The bank manager scrutinized her, questioned her statements, and denied her deposit. However, within minutes, a single declaration transformed the situation. She's my mother, and I own this bank. The automatic doors of Hillstone Federal Bank opened with a hiss, allowing the late morning sun and the deliberate steps of 73-year-old Gloria Hightower to enter. She moved with a cane, not due to necessity, but because she preferred the stability it provided. Her dark green dress was neatly pressed. Her silver hair was arranged in the familiar style she's kept for decades. She held her purse in one hand, the other holding a check bearing her name. Gloria was familiar with this location. She had banked here for almost 15 years. The same branch, the same routines. She typically came in during the week, shortly after breakfast with friends at Janine's diner. However, something felt amiss today. The woman at the front desk hardly looked up when Gloria entered. Not even a greeting. That was out of the ordinary. Gloria dismissed it as insignificant. Perhaps the staff was understaffed. It was possible the young woman hadn't been taught to acknowledge older customers. She proceeded to the counter and waited calmly behind a man wearing a baseball cap. After several minutes passed, and when it was her turn, the teller, a young woman, approximately early 20s, offered a hesitant glance over Gloria's shoulder, then murmured, "One moment, please." She then went into a back room. Gloria remained standing quietly, still holding her check, still smiling gently. Shortly afterward, a tall woman wearing a light gray blazer came forward. Her features were distinct. Her blonde hair was pulled straight back, and her eyes appeared analytical rather than observant. A name tag identified her as Leslie Ryland, branch manager. "May I assist you?" Leslie asked, crossing her arms. Gloria raised the check slightly and responded, "Yes, I need to deposit this into my savings account." Leslie did not take the check. Instead, she examined it, then looked back at Gloria. "Could I see your identification, please?" Gloria readily replied, retrieving it from her purse. She presented her driver's license and the check. It originated from a retirement account payout, a standard occurrence. Nothing appeared suspicious. Leslie scrutinized the identification for an extended period, an unusually long time. She then re-examined the check. Leslie then inquired, "How did you come into possession of this?" Gloria appeared surprised. "I'm sorry," she responded. Leslie clarified, waving the check. "This check is for a significant amount. We are obligated to verify it before processing. We have encountered similar situations previously." Gloria responded, tilting her head. "I have deposited checks like this here before. There had never been a problem before." Leslie offered a strained, unconvincing smile. "Banking policies have been revised," she stated. "I'm sure you appreciate that." A gentleman seated nearby subtly adjusted his position. Gloria noticed it from her peripheral vision. The woman standing behind her made a quiet noise. Gloria sensed that someone was observing them. Gloria inhaled deeply. "Ms. Ryland, I have all my required documentation. This is my account. I have been receiving direct deposit, and I've been a customer at First National Bank for years. My name, my address, and my identification all correspond perfectly." Still, Leslie remained firm. "We still require a more thorough verification. Please come with me to the back." That's when Gloria experienced it. Not fear, not shame, something akin to offense. Not just for herself, but for every older woman who had been spoken down to. For every person who had been regarded with suspicion simply for entering a room. "I prefer to remain here," Gloria stated resolutely. Leslie moved closer, softening her tone. "Ma'am, you must cooperate, or we will have to place a hold on the funds and report potential fraud." Instances like this have occurred previously. That's when Gloria experienced a tightening in her chest. She wasn't inclined to engage in a dispute, not with an individual of this nature, not in the presence of onlookers. However, she wasn't planning to depart, so she opted to retrieve her phone. Gloria's hands moved with measured precision, steady rather than trembling, as she extracted her phone from her purse. Upon the screen illuminating, Leslie's gaze narrowed. "I am contacting my son," Gloria stated calmly, scrolling through her contacts. "He will resolve this situation." Leslie gave a humorless chuckle. "Ma'am, Contacting your son won't alter procedure. We operate under established guidelines. If there's no cause for concern, there's no need for alarm. Gloria didn't respond. She simply raised the phone to her ear and moved a pace to the side, distancing herself from the counter. She was weary of being addressed, as if she lacked understanding, as if she were incapable of handling her finances. Two tellers positioned behind the glass exchanged glances. The young man at the end of the line advanced a short distance, seemingly about to speak, but then stopped. The room was quiet, punctuated only by the gentle clicking of keyboards and the quiet whir of a copier in the corner. "Hey, baby," Gloria said into the phone. "I'm at the bank. Hillstone on Meridian. They're having difficulty verifying my check again." She paused. "Yes. Her name's Leslie." Leslie's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, ma'am. Sharing employee names over the phone is something we avoid." Gloria didn't acknowledge the request. Acknowledgement. "I'm feeling well, just a bit tired." Following a brief silence. "Okay, I will remain here." She disconnected the call and returned the phone to her purse. Subsequently, with the same composed demeanor, she stated, "My son is en route." Leslie folded her arms. "Ma'am, I must reiterate. Elevated voices or disruptive behavior may result in dismissal." Gloria inclined her head slightly. "Do I appear to be causing a problem?" Leslie's face reddened. She averted her gaze momentarily, then returned her attention. "I have a duty to safeguard this establishment. Improper fund verification puts the bank at risk." "Do you believe I am a risk?" "I believe you're not being helpful." Leslie retorted sharply. That was the breaking point. That single word. The man standing 2 places back murmured something quietly. The woman behind Gloria moved closer and said, "She is being courteous. You are the one raising your voice." Leslie addressed them. "Please refrain from interfering. We are conducting a private transaction." "It doesn't seem very private," the woman remarked. Gloria remained silent throughout the exchange. She felt no need to dispute anything or offer explanations. She simply needed to wait. 5 minutes elapsed. Leslie moved away, feigning a check of her computer, but her gaze kept lifting, much like a dog anticipating the mail carrier. The young teller from earlier approached and murmured something into Leslie's ear. Her gaze moved towards the entrance. Then the glass doors opened once more. A man entered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing a crisp white shirt, but without a tie. He seemed calm, yet focused, and moved with a quiet, purposeful stride. He made no visual sweep of the room, instead walking directly towards the lobby center, toward Gloria. "Hi, Mama." Gloria returned a gentle smile. "Hey, baby." Immediately, the room's atmosphere altered. The man turned to address the reception desk. "Is there an issue with my mother's account?" Leslie moved forward, hesitant about whether to extend a handshake or request identification. She opted for a formal nod instead. "This is your mother?" he asked. "Yes," he responded briefly. "My name is Grant Hightower." Leslie's mouth opened slightly. Her gaze shifted around the room, then returned to Gloria, then to Grant. "Mr. Hightower?" Grant retrieved his leather card holder and laid it on the counter. It displayed his ID, his business card, and his title, Hillstone Federal, Executive Board Chair. Leslie found herself unable to speak. For a full 10 seconds, silence filled the room. Leslie's gaze remained fixed on the card, as if expecting it to ignite. A subtle muscle spasm flickered across her cheek, the type that arises when a mind struggles to comprehend what the eyes have witnessed. Grant refrained from speaking quickly. He kept his hands clasped before him, standing composed and silent, his voice even but undeniably resolute. "I'm asking one more time," he stated. "Was there a problem with my mother's account?" Leslie hesitated, then asked, "Mr. Hightower?" "We were just following procedures. Large checks need to be verified, and I—" Grant interrupted, not loudly but sharply. "You looked her in the face and decided she wasn't credible. You questioned where the check came from. You asked how she came into possession of it. Does that sound like standard procedure?" Leslie's mouth opened again, but no words came. Her face had gone a full shade lighter. "I've reviewed those procedures myself," Grant continued. "I approved those actions last quarter." That documentation contains no instruction to question a long-standing customer while disregarding her identification. Certainly not with a public display in front of witnesses. The bank was quiet. The only sounds were the clicking of keyboards from employees appearing to work and the consistent hum of the air conditioning above. No one was willing to avert their gaze now. Gloria stood nearby, arms folded. She wasn't smiling. She didn't seem pleased. She seemed weary. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Hightower," Leslie stated rapidly. "This is simply a misunderstanding. I didn't intend to offend anyone." "But you did," Grant countered. "You humiliated her." "I didn't." "You did," Leslie replied. Grant's voice remained even. That was what made his statement so impactful. There was no shouting, no theatrical displays, just the facts, just his presence. Leslie's voice trembled. I didn't realize she was your mother." Grant looked at her. Why would that change anything? Leslie started to speak, then stopped. "Do you understand how that sounds?" he inquired. Leslie spoke the words aloud. For the first time, Leslie genuinely observed Gloria. She truly looked. It wasn't solely embarrassment now visible on her face. There was fear. The fear of repercussions. "Have a seat," Grant said, indicating the chair behind the counter. "I'll handle the deposit." Leslie paused. That wasn't an invitation. Leslie turned slowly and walked toward the back, her shoes clicking hollowly against the tile. Grant approached the counter, took the check, glanced at it, and typed a few numbers into the system. The young teller observed with admiration. "Here you go," he said, giving the receipt to his mother. "Full deposit. Effective immediately." Gloria accepted the slip, folded it, and nodded. "Thank you, baby. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." They paused, a mother and son in a peaceful setting. Then Gloria remarked, "You didn't need to come all the way here." Grant gave her a look. "Yes, I did. But you're busy. You have meetings. Aboard a run." He shrugged. "You managed a household for 25 years with one income, for kids, and a Buick that barely started. I can spare a few minutes." She chuckled softly. "You always were dramatic," he smiled. "And you always were the calm one." But the moment wasn't over yet. Grant turned slowly, letting his eyes sweep the room. The customers remained present, some appearing to examine their phones, while others paused during transactions, attempting to blend into the background while still observing everything. The woman positioned behind Gloria retreated slightly, creating room for them. The man who had spoken previously offered Grant a discreet nod of acknowledgement. Grant made no direct comments to them, but he did not dismiss their presence. He understood they would retain this moment, each in every aspect, not only due to his identity, but also because of what they witnessed. A woman felt diminished until the reality arrived, formally dressed. Leslie's absence was brief. She returned with a senior associate, visibly anxious, restless, attempting a smile, but unable to manage it. The older man spoke quietly to Grant, extended an apology, then indicated the rear offices. But Grant remained still. "She is well now," he stated, pointing to his mother. "However, this is no longer a simple exchange." Mr. Hightower began. "We absolutely recognize that, and we're taking it seriously. Ms. Ryland has been here less than a year. She's still adjusting to the—" "Stop," Grant interjected. "Don't explain her behavior to me. That's not your job. That's hers." Leslie remained still, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She appeared to be attempting to suppress tears, or perhaps prevent herself from speaking. According to Grant, addressing the associate, the task at hand is to assess the situation within this room and grasp the implications of a valued client being subjected to treatment resembling that of a criminal, solely due to her appearance not aligning with the image of someone who owns a yacht. Grant emphasized, raising a hand, "Have you ever met someone resembling my mother and considered she must be concealing something? Have you ever scrutinized a white customer depositing a check?" The man visibly recoiled. "That's not." "Don't deceive me," Grant stated. "I'm not the board chair today. I am simply a son. And what I observed this morning was a woman who instilled in me the values of honesty, patience, and respect, being questioned as if she had fabricated her own signature." Gloria eventually intervened. She said, "Baby," but Grant wasn't done speaking. He stated, that she could have been questioned with courtesy. She could have been spoken to privately, and any concerns explained. Instead, a public spectacle was created, and she was made to feel unwelcome. The only reason for the interruption was my appearance in a tailored jacket. A silence followed. Gloria surveyed the room, noting the expressions, some filled with shame, others with anger, still others with inspiration. She lightly touched her son's arm. "Let's leave," she said quietly. "Let's not say another word." He faced her, his jaw rigid, his chest tense. But then he saw it in her eyes. That familiar calm. The same calm she possessed while working 2 jobs and still preparing dinner. Amidst challenging circumstances, she demonstrated remarkable poise. He acknowledged this with a nod. All right. They proceeded toward the exit together, navigating past the tellers, the customers, and the visibly shaken manager who struggled to meet her gaze. As they prepared to leave through the doors, Grant paused. He turned, looked at Leslie, and said softly, "Every customer who walks in here deserves the same respect you'd give your boss. Because you never know who they are or who raised them." They departed, but the repercussions were just beginning. As Grant and Gloria reached the sidewalk outside, his phone was already vibrating. Initially, it was his assistant, then a member of the board, and subsequently the bank's general counsel. The news had spread quicker than either of them anticipated. A customer had captured a portion of the incident on video. It was already being shared. Gloria observed him. "You won't answer that." Grant allowed it to continue ringing. "No, not at this moment." They continued walking at a slow, even pace, the sun warming Gloria's head as cars passed leisurely down Meridian Avenue. She remained silent initially. So did he. It was a moment of quiet they both required. "You don't have to rush down here," she eventually said. Grant chuckled but didn't smile. "I say that every time." He added, "I can handle myself." "I know you can," Gloria replied. She stopped before a bench and sat down. Grant remained standing close by, looking at his phone screen without unlocking it. The notifications accumulated, resembling stacked bricks. However, he wasn't prepared to construct anything from them just yet. Within the bank, Leslie Ryland remained motionless in her compact glass office. A regional manager had already contacted her. Human resources required a report before the day's end. Yet, none of that held significance for her at that moment. The image of how Grant had regarded her lingered in her mind, as if revealing a perspective that diminished her, not through disparagement, but because it highlighted the limitations of her own assessments. The subsequent morning brought forth a communication from Hillstone Federal's board. It announced the commencement of an internal investigation, alongside assurances that customers will be notified regarding adjustments to sensitivity training and customer relations policy. However, this represented merely a public statement. The truly significant developments unfolded privately. Later that week, Grant took his seat at the head of the conference table, the familiar space typically used for investment strategy and profit reports. This meeting, however, had a different purpose. "I want every manager to recertify on customer service protocol," he announced, "but not with those same corporate videos from 5 years ago. We're engaging outside instructors. I don't want lectures. I want eye contact, role play, and reflection." An older board member expressed surprise. "That's a significant change." "It should be," Grant responded. "What about the manager?" Grant hesitated. He was reluctant to dismiss Leslie, not because she didn't warrant consequences, but because he didn't want this to appear as retribution. That wasn't the upbringing his mother provided. "She is suspended," he stated eventually, "subject to review." However, his focus is on addressing the underlying cultural issues that led her to believe that kind of conduct was permissible. Later that evening, Gloria settled into her preferred chair near the window at her home. The house was quiet, punctuated only by the ticking of the old wall clock and the gentle simmering of her evening tea. Grant was settled on a couch, his tie undone, his shoes slightly loosened. "You handled it well," she said. He shrugged. "I let myself get angry." "You should have," he replied, looking up. "You're not upset," Gloria said with a wry laugh. "Darling, I've experienced far more challenging situations." She continued, "This isn't the first instance someone has attempted to make me feel like I don't belong, and it likely won't be the last. That's the most troubling aspect, Grant stated. She took a sip of her tea, acknowledging that this wasn't a new situation. You can't control how people treat you, Grant said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Only how you respond to them. Gloria smiled. I just dislike that you had to deal with that kind of behavior at this stage in your life. That's the interesting thing, she replied. The older I become, the less it affects me. What caused me pain wasn't her words. It was the fact that she believed she could speak to anyone in that manner. She paused. Perhaps now, she won't. Despite the difficulties, a positive outcome eventually emerged. The subsequent week, Gloria revisited the bank. She wore the same shoes and carried the same purse, but her demeanor had changed. Upon entering, every employee behind the counter visibly adjusted. The newly appointed temporary manager, Denise Alvarez, a woman with a quiet voice, approached the desk to greet her directly. Miss Hightower, she said kindly, we are pleased to see you. Gloria offered a slight smile. I'm simply here to withdraw some funds. Certainly, I will assist you myself. As they walked toward the counter, Gloria observed that the posters on the wall had been updated. The advertisements for loans and savings plans remained, but new posters, a series titled Respect is Standard, now hung near the front. Each featured portraits of real customers from the local community, all sharing the same tagline. We see you. We serve you. We respect you. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a beginning. Denise processed her withdrawal, demonstrating patience and clarity. Straightforward and professional. Before her departure, Denise stated, we're holding community meetings beginning next month. These will be listening sessions. Grant asked us to invite value customers like you. Would you be willing to speak? Gloria expressed surprise. You want me to deliver a speech? The response came, not a speech. Simply share your story, however you prefer. Gloria considered the request. I will attend, but I won't present anything in a misleading way. That's precisely what they wanted. She left that day not feeling entirely satisfied, but she felt acknowledged. And at her age, that carried weight. Later that evening, Gloria sat across from Grant again, this time at a quiet booth inside an old barbecue joint in Fort Worth they both liked. It smelled like hickory and cornbread, and nobody there seemed to notice what either of them did for a living. You remember that day you got in trouble in 7th grade? She asked suddenly, picking at her baked beans. Which one? The incident with Mr. Hale came to mind. He accused you of plagiarism regarding your paper. Grant sighed. Yes, he recalled. You returned home holding that paper, visibly upset. Tears streamed down your face as you insisted you hadn't cheated. And he believed you. Yet, he still made you rewrite the entire paper. He chuckled. You said that rewriting something sometimes demonstrates its originality. She affirmed exactly. Grant turned to her. But that's what happened? Gloria replied negatively. It seemed this occasion required assistance from another. He paused, allowing the statement to resonate. Then she added, I didn't raise you to be rich, Grant. I raised you to be right. He glanced at her across the table, a palpable feeling just below the surface. I know, he responded. And sometimes, she continued, doing the right thing means you forfeit ease. You enter spaces that aren't welcoming. You voice your thoughts when silence would be simpler. And you visit the bank even when it feels demeaning. No matter the circumstance, it impacts those who care. He blinked once, twice, then smiled. You know, you really should speak at that meeting, she said. Oh, I will, Gloria replied. But I'm bringing my purse, my cane, and my full voice. No softening at this time. Grant laughed. You never softened it. You just made it sound kind. She grinned, then picked up her napkin and dabbed the corner of her mouth. Kind doesn't mean quiet. The situation didn't conclude there, as Gloria had further remarks. A community meeting took place 3 weeks later within a simple civic center located just off Lancaster Avenue. There were no special decorations and no filming crews were present. Instead, attendees found folding chairs, a podium, and a hand-painted sign that read, Listening Circle, Hillstone Federal Bank. Upon Gloria's arrival, the room was already half full, comprising both bank staff and customers. The gathering included older folks, young professionals, small business owners, and a few individuals she didn't recognize, presumably there to observe or report. She wore a cobalt blue blouse that highlighted the silver in her hair. She avoided flashy jewelry, opting for her usual pearl earrings, the same pair she wore to her granddaughter's graduation. Upon her arrival, the conversation quieted. People turned and heads lifted. Grant was seated near the front, but remained seated. He understood his mother didn't require an escort. Not on this day. When it was Gloria's time to address the gathering, she didn't immediately move to the podium. Instead, she positioned herself just beside it, close enough to be easily heard, but maintaining enough distance to make eye contact with everyone present without unnecessary ceremony. The room fell silent. She cleared her throat. I'm Gloria Hightower. I'm a retired school nurse. I've resided here for more than 40 years, and I'm a client of Hillstone Federal for almost 15 years. There were some nods, some quiet acknowledgments. I am here today because I was asked to recount my experience. However, this extends beyond what occurred that morning at the bank. That portion is straightforward. I experienced disrespectful treatment. I was questioned regarding a check bearing my name. I was made to feel out of place. This wasn't due to anything I said, nor was it due to anything I did. It was solely based on my appearance. Her voice remained steady. It didn't waver, but it resonated low, full, and unwavering. Initially, I wasn't angry. I felt pain. I was certain I had committed no wrongdoing. Nevertheless, someone deemed me questionable. Someone decided my dignity could be compromised. She paused, allowing those words to resonate. I intended to remain silent, simply contacting my son and waiting, calmly. However, I came to understand something later. People rely on silence when they behave in such a manner. They depend on our courtesy, our tolerance, our weariness. But occasionally, the most honorable course of action is to object. A hush fell over the room. My intention isn't to damage anyone's professional standing. This isn't about retribution. It's about achieving change. Not for my benefit. I am 73 years old and possess a sufficient understanding of the world. But for the individual who next enters a bank with trust and departs feeling diminished. A man positioned towards the rear dabbed at his eye. A woman seated across the aisle gripped her notepad without putting pen to paper. Gloria rested her hands in her lap. We reside in a nation that frequently discusses principles of equity, regarding values, regarding treating everyone equally. But those ideas hold no substance unless they manifest in everyday interactions. At the checkout, during phone calls, in the way we address someone who appears different. She glanced at Grant briefly. He offered no smile. He offered no nod. He simply observed her the way one observes a fire that warms and humbles simultaneously. Thank you for listening, she said, then stepped back without fanfare. The room did not erupt in applause. It did not require it. A few hands clapped gently. A few heads bowed. But what lingered was heavier than noise. It was reflection. After the meeting, people lined up, not for handshakes or photos, but to talk, to share. One woman said she'd experienced the same thing at a different branch. A young man said it reminded him of the way his grandmother used to be followed around stores. And the bank staff, well, most of them just said thank you, with eyes that conveyed more than their words. That night, while Gloria sat in her kitchen with tea in hand, Grant texted her, "You were incredible." She responded slowly, "They'll remember that." She continued, "I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it so they remember each other." He summoned her to publicly shame her before his affluent guests. However, when she placed her hands on the piano, the room became utterly silent. Savannah heat operates without fairness in July. The air was dense and heavy, clinging to skin and making clothing feel burdensome. Beverly Gaines stood near the wrought iron gate of 742 Prospect Lane, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and a subtle moment of uncertainty in her chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anxiety, just a brief pause. A moment of stillness before entering another person's space. She hadn't anticipated employment in a residence of that nature. Not at this point in her life. 48 years old, no children, no husband. Just a one-bedroom apartment near Chatham Square and a voice that still occasionally sang in her sleep. But when her job at the dry cleaners closed unexpectedly, Beverly understood the urgency. Rent, it wouldn't wait. Upon the agency's call inquiring about her availability for a private client cleaning, she immediately accepted before they completed their request. The Whitlow estate embodied the expected grandeur of established Southern wealth. White columns, a wraparound porch, and boxwood hedges meticulously trimmed. It was a place of such refinement that even the birds seemed to move with a subdued grace. She proceeded up the steps, rang the bell, and the door opened with almost immediate responsiveness. "You're punctual," the house manager stated, looking at her clipboard without offering a smile. That was already an improvement over the previous employee. Beverly didn't take it as a slight. She rarely did. It was necessary if you wanted to retain employment in another person's home. You smile, you nod, you blend into the surroundings. The initial weeks passed without incident. She cleaned tile, shined silver, and discovered the location of every control and concealed item. She avoided drawing attention to herself, responding only when addressed, and always using sir or mom. Mr. Whitlow paid her little regard, preoccupied with entertaining lawyers, business associates, or women in high heels, all of whom departed before breakfast. Her presence wasn't meant to be acknowledged. However, one afternoon, while dusting the second-floor hallway, she stopped near the music room. The room was unoccupied, but the grand piano stood prominently, like a centerpiece in a deserted banquet hall. An itch in her hand, akin to muscle memory, prompted her movement. She entered, closing the door softly, and settled down briefly. The keys felt smooth, not new, but carefully maintained. She played a single note, then another, and a recognizable tune emerged, a childhood melody, her mother's preferred gospel hymn. Just a few measures were played, gentle and slow. She didn't notice the approaching footsteps until the final note faded. "You're aware that task isn't included in your duties, correct?" Beverly abruptly stood, as if discovered in wrongdoing. Mr. Whitlow rested against the doorframe, holding a wine glass and smiling knowingly. He was a man who rarely posed a question without already possessing the answer. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean you play," he interjected. She glanced downward slightly. "When I was young," he tilted his head, as if she'd made a comical remark. Who would have thought? And then he departed. Beverly made no further reference to the incident, deciding she had likely tested her fortune. She was unaware that that instance had already initiated something within his thoughts, something he would utilize subsequently, not to commend her, but to exhibit her. Charles Whitlow never needed to strive for charm. He carried it as a second skin, polished, rehearsed, and just artificial enough to be hazardous. At 56, he appeared precisely the Southern gentleman he feigned to be. Linen suits during the summer, costly shoes designed for standing, not walking. His smile could market falsehoods without hesitation. Beneath the outward appearance of success, a sense of decay existed that primarily concerned the staff. To the public, he presented himself as a philanthropist, organizing fundraisers for the arts, contributing to schools, and hosting annual garden parties that garnered attention in the society pages. He engaged in public appearances, shaking hands with judges and interacting with people at political events, creating the impression of a political aspiration, despite never explicitly stating his intentions. Within the house, however, Charles maintained control through ridicule. The assistance was readily available, and he valued wielding it to discomfort others. Beverly recognized this tendency from the start. He rarely shouted or raised his voice, yet possessed a remarkable ability to diminish people's sense of self without physical contact. For instance, he once inquired of the new chef if his sophisticated California training encompassed the ability to prepare acceptable grits while serving 20 guests. On another occasion, he observed a gardener stooping to retrieve a dropped rose and remarked, "Careful now, could send you back to minimum wage." No one challenged him. No one offered a correction. He was Charles Whitlow. In this town, his reputation commanded respect. Even the legal authorities didn't always question his pronouncements. Beverly attempted to avoid him, but that wasn't always feasible. He began to probe her. Initially, these were minor comments. Gaines, he stated one morning while preparing breakfast. Have you ever worn anything other than beige? Later, while enjoying bourbon on the porch. You seem very quiet. Do you ever speak, or do you simply move about like a phantom? She did not respond to his attempt at conversation. She continued working. Then one evening, as she walked through the foyer carrying polished silver, he spoke to her. Are you still playing those piano keys when no one is present? Beverly hesitated. No, sir. He smiled, appearing skeptical. That must be amusing. She departed, feeling constricted in her throat, but maintaining a steady composure. Afterward, the other staff members cautioned her concerning him. That man's a snake, muttered Harold, the groundskeeper. He feeds on weakness. Don't let him find yours. But Whitlow didn't need to dig. He already had what he wanted. 2 weeks later, invitations started going out for his summer garden party. Beverly overheard the details while changing linens upstairs. It was going to be a large event. Close to 100 guests were expected, with live jazz music and wine flown in from Napa. The staff doubled for the weekend. Every room was scrubbed spotless. Everything had to be perfect. She had experience with large-scale events. The demands didn't bother her. Provided no one focused their attention on her for too long, she could handle it. However, Whitlow had different intentions. The night preceding the party, he intercepted her in the hallway. You know, he stated, tomorrow could be your opportunity. She regarded him with confusion. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Don't be taken aback if I request you perform for the audience. Just a brief distraction. It might be enjoyable. Her stomach tightened. I would prefer not to, sir. He lifted an eyebrow. Fortunately, I wasn't seeking a request, and so the decision was made swiftly. She found no rest that night, not due to worry about humiliation, but because she understood his intentions precisely. He desired a display, and she was uncertain whether to provide it or deny it. By noon the following day, the Whitlow estate no longer resembled a home. It appeared like a performance stage. White tents were erected over the manicured lawn. Cream linen draped the tables, shimmering beneath centerpieces of fresh orchids and color lilies. Jazz musicians tuned their instruments on the terrace. Uniformed staff moved with precision, pouring wine, adjusting placements, and folding napkins with the artistry of origami. Beverly kept her head down, as was her habit. She arranged canapes, assisted in polishing stemware, and patrolled the perimeter with a tray of cucumber water and melting ice cubes. No one made eye contact with her. She didn't object. The feeling of being unseen offered comfort, a sense of security. However, her hands trembled. The source of her anxiety wasn't the piano itself. It was the underlying motive. She was certain Whitlow wasn't offering her a genuine opportunity. He was orchestrating a joke, and she was the target. As the clock reached 4 p.m., the attendees began to arrive. Real estate developers, local judges, business owners, art patrons, and women displaying polished smiles. They flowed in, embracing, laughing, enjoying drinks, and casually mentioning names. From the shade of the veranda, Beverly observed them move across the lawn as if they were born on polished marble. She fell out of place here. Not among these people. Not in this house. Not even in this city some days. But she wasn't here to fit in. She was here to serve. By 615, the band had paused, and Charles Whitlow was feeling confident. 2 glasses of red wine in and a dozen compliments later, he strolled to the center of the lawn and raised his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice strong enough to draw attention from everyone. Before dinner is served, I thought we'd enjoy a brief, unexpected entertainment. Beverly paused. Her tray shifted a little. Some guests applauded quietly. Others glanced around, seemingly puzzled. Whitlow proceeded, his smile constrained. It turns out one of our staff members possesses a hidden talent. Beverly? People looked over. She remained still. He waved expansively toward the open French doors leading to the music room. Someone suggested I play something, recalling I occasionally play the piano. A few laughs rippled through the room, a gentle amusement typical of those accustomed to wealth and charmed by unexpected moments. Applause and quiet whispers followed. Beverly paused, experiencing the uncomfortable feeling of deciding between declining and complying. Yet, she didn't retreat. She gave her tray to a server, dried her hands on her apron, and entered the building. The guests followed, now filled with curiosity. Within the music room, the grand piano was positioned under gentle lighting, appearing as if it had been awaiting attention all day. Beverly settled onto the bench, her posture upright, her heart racing. A profound silence descended upon the room. Charles leaned against the doorway, holding a glass, looking as confident as always. Whenever you're ready, she observed the keys. They remained still. Her fingers paused above them. The room anticipated something other than music. They expected a jest, a hesitant melody, a discordant note, a source of amusement for later, a way to diminish her. However, Beverly's musical journey didn't begin with jazz, gospel, or any extravagant style. It started with a lullaby her mother would hum, a simple sequence of just 5 notes, as gentle as a whisper. From there, she expanded upon it. Her hands moved deliberately, as if awakening something. Minor chords softened into major ones. Gospel rhythms subtly infiltrated classical phrasing. Jazz embellishments playfully highlighted each shift. The room fell silent. An awkward silence descended, not born of courtesy, but from a shared lack of words. One woman murmured, "Is this staged?" Another, her champagne flute suspended in the air, paused, forgetting to drink. Beverly remained unseeing, her playing as if transported to a different place, a sanctuary, a cherished memory. And Whitlow, still positioned near the door, had lost his smile. Not because of a thwarted scheme, but because of a sudden understanding. She hadn't been the object of ridicule. He had. There are instances in life when time seems to halt. The room, filled with costly timepieces and carefully crafted smiles, remained utterly still as Beverly Gaines infused each note with fragments of her history. Her performance wasn't intended to create an impression, nor was it directed at the mother. She played because for the initial time in several years, no one was dictating her identity. Her fingers moved confidently, not with uncertainty, but with profound, unspoken conviction. Not ostentatious, not rapid, simply genuine. Her left hand maintained the rhythm, consistently, like a quiet inhalation. Her right hand conveyed the narrative. A range of emotions resonated within the music: sorrow, defiance, and a subdued joy that constricted the chest. Even those unfamiliar with music sensed an internal resonance. The sole presence was the music itself. There are no sounds of silverware, no ringing phones, no hushed conversations. Just her, the piano, and 100 people holding their breath. In the corner, the band's saxophonist set down his drink and leaned forward, his jaw slightly parted. Across the room, a woman, visibly upset, murmured to her husband, "She's playing Duke Ellington." She then asked, "But that transition, did you notice it?" That was gospel. Beverly hadn't registered any of it. Instead, she recalled the sound of footsteps from 20 years prior, her mother pacing in their small kitchen in Tallahassee, humming while stirring beans over a low flame. She remembered the cracked metronome resting on top of her childhood piano. She recalled the tremor in her mother's hands near the end, yet she never missed a beat when playing. She recalled abandoning music the day following her mother's passing. She remembered storing it away, similar to a sweater that was outgrown, until today. Today, she allowed it to return. The concluding notes were subdued, lacking drama or spectacle, simply resonant. Like a statement finished because it felt whole, followed by silence. Not uncomfortable, not bewildered, but deeply respectful. Then applause arose. It began with a single person, an elderly man positioned at the rear, clapping deliberately, his gaze unfocused. Subsequently, another joined in. Then, the entire room rose to their feet. It wasn't driven by a sense of courtesy, but by the involuntary movement of their limbs. Beverly rose from a bench. Her hands now shook, not due to anxiety, but due to a different sensation. A feeling she hadn't experienced in years: relief. For the first time, the room regarded her not as a servant, not as an extra, but as someone who'd offered them something genuine. Someone quietly asked, "Who is she?" Beverly made no reply. She merely moved away from the piano and offered a slight nod. She didn't look at anyone and walked toward the hallway. Someone blocked her path. It was Ava Renfield, a local arts patron known for curating talent across the South. She stepped forward, stunned. "That was remarkable. Do you play professionally?" "No, ma'am," Beverly replied, lowering her eyes. "Were you trained?" Beverly paused. "A long time ago," Ava said, blinking. "Well, wherever it was, they should have built a stage around you." Others gathered. One guest asked if she taught lessons. Another offered her a card. A woman, her voice full of genuine feeling, stated, "You made me feel something I haven't felt in years." Whitlow remained still, positioned close to the French doors, his smile absent. His gaze focused on Beverly, but it wasn't playful. It held something different. Could it be embarrassment? Possibly. Yet it appeared to be a pride he would never be able to acknowledge. Beverly didn't pause for his response. She had already given him more than he warranted, and retrieved something she believed she had permanently laid to rest. Outside, the party had resumed. Waiters replenished champagne flutes. The jazz band resumed playing on the terrace, but an alteration was perceptible, as if the tempo had altered. It was as if Beverly's music hadn't fully departed, but resonated within people, close to their hearts. Inside, Beverly had moved to the kitchen. She sought no fanfare. She desired no accolades. She simply needed to breathe. She rested against the counter, gazing at the floor, her apron still fastened. A few minutes elapsed. Harold, the groundskeeper, entered the room. He remained mostly silent, offering only a quiet whistle and crossing his arms. "You certainly know how to bruise a wealthy man's pride," he commented, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Beverly managed a faint chuckle, though it didn't reflect in her eyes. "I wasn't intending to do anything," she said. "That's precisely why it was so effective," he responded. She poured herself a glass of water. Her hands had become more stable, but her heart still raced. Harold departed shortly afterward. He preferred brevity, and Beverly valued that. Shortly thereafter, Charles Whitlow entered the kitchen. She didn't acknowledge him with a turn of her head. She didn't need to. He placed his glass down with unnecessary force. "You certainly made an impact," he remarked. Beverly remained silent. "I envisioned a brief, amusing exchange," he continued. "I didn't anticipate it evolving into a performance." Still, she offered no reply. He rested against the counter next to her. "Do you know what people are discussing?" "I'm harboring a talent within my own home. It feels as though I'm a character in a television drama." She made contact with his eyes, a look of composure and clarity. "You didn't conceal me. You simply didn't observe." His jaw moved slightly, a single twitch. "You believe you humiliated me?" "No, sir," she replied gently. "You accomplished that entirely on your own." He looked at her for a brief moment, then turned and departed. The subsequent day, telephone calls began. A representative from the Arts Council and a local music school inquired if she would contemplate offering a master class. A former producer received an invitation from a retired colleague for lunch. The experience felt dreamlike. People who had previously ignored her now regarded her differently. Beverly, however, did not respond to most of the calls immediately. She completed her scheduled responsibilities for the week, as was her routine. This included cleaning the floors, folding the laundry, and polishing the silver. Yet, a shift was evident in her movements. She no longer seemed to be attempting to remain unnoticed. That Friday afternoon, she entered Whitlow's office and submitted her resignation. 2 weeks. There was no explanation offered. He didn't request one. He simply nodded, examined the paper for a moment longer than necessary, and responded, "Fine." She prepared to leave. "You'll be back," he called after her. "They always come back," she replied, pausing in the doorway. "Perhaps, but not to you." Beyond the window, the wind rustled the garden hedges. Visitors would arrive and depart. The staff would be changed, and the gatherings would proceed. Yet, the recollection of that afternoon would linger. The issue wasn't the piano. It was the fact that the woman he attempted to control had subtly reminded everyone she wasn't under his authority, a mark he couldn't erase. Beverly Gaines, however, didn't seek retribution. She wasn't pursuing acknowledgement. She was at long last moving towards something positive, and it wasn't Charles Whitlow's house. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Beverly Gaines exited 742 Prospect Lane for the last time. There was no elaborate farewell, no presents, and no remarks from Charles Whitlow. The only sound was the creak of the iron gate as she closed it behind her, and the sun felt pleasant on her shoulders as she walked into the street. She still held the same canvas bag she had carried that first day. But she had changed, not because of the comments from the guests, the applause, or the unexpected attention to her talent. Those things had never truly been important to her. What mattered was that she had recalled who she was, and she wouldn't allow anyone to suppress that again. Returning to her apartment, she retrieved an old box from the back of her closet. It contained yellowing sheet music, a chipped metronome, a stack of journals from her early 20s, and a photo of her mother sitting at an upright piano. Eyes closed, hands mid-chord. That night, Beverly played until the neighbors knocked on the wall. She played every song she hadn't let herself touch in years. Pieces she thought she'd forgotten came back with ease. She navigated these experiences with amusement, albeit quietly and openly. Following a week of evenings dedicated to intensive work and mornings spent in quiet thought, she arrived at a resolution. She contacted the Arts Council again, and then the music school. She even responded to a call from a woman who wished to write a profile on her for a regional magazine. One by one, she reestablished contact, not for recognition, not for praise, but because perhaps her talent could still be of use. After 2 months had passed, Beverly was providing piano lessons twice a week at a community center in Garden City. The majority of her students were children from working-class homes, along with a few adults, women who had always desired to play, but hadn't previously had the opportunity. She was patient, direct, and kind. She never discussed Charles Whitlow, nor did she mention the party. However, information spread. Following a lesson one day, a girl named Nia, who was just under 10 years old and full of energy, glanced up from the piano keys and inquired, "Miss Beverly, did you truly work as a maid at that large house on Prospect Lane?" Beverly smiled. "I did," she responded. "Did they require you to play music?" "No, dear," she replied softly. "They attempted to humiliate me, but I determined what they would receive." Nia seemed puzzled for a moment. Then she smiled. "You're quite well known now," Beverly laughed. "I'm simply someone who recalled her identity." It was a feeling surpassing fame. She walked home that day, her shoulders squared and her head held high. This wasn't due to arrogance, but because she no longer bore any burden. Behind her, Charles Whitlow continued to host gatherings. However, news had circulated regarding the events of that summer evening. People recalled how Beverly played, the ensuing stillness, and how a room overflowing with wealth couldn't affect a woman who had nothing to validate. Some suggested Whitlow had altered since that time. Subtly, he consumed more alcohol and smiled less. Several familiar patrons ceased their visits. However, Beverly gave no consideration to these absences. She had music to instruct, pupils to motivate, and a life that was now entirely her own. Few individuals receive an opportunity to reclaim aspects of themselves they had previously relinquished. But occasionally, if one remains silent for a sufficient duration, the world presents a chance to speak with emphasis. And Beverly utilized hers with poise. For influence isn't always embodied by the most prominent voice present. It can feel like an unexpected melody, leaving people questioning why they ever had reservations about you. If you've ever experienced being underestimated, overlooked, or told you possessed less potential than you truly do, recall Beverly Gaines. And when your opportunity arrives, embrace it as if it were destined for you. Remember to subscribe for further stories of this nature. According to my mom, she works at NASA. The entire class laughed until someone with a badge entered the room and altered the atmosphere. It was a Tuesday shortly after recess, and the classroom had a subtle scent of hand sanitizer and pencil shavings. Ms. Lawson had just finished roll call when she clapped her hands and announced, "All right, it's time for our What My Parent Does presentations." One after another, students share their stories. A father who worked as a firefighter, a mother employed a local bakery, a brother serving in the army who was acknowledged with a round of applause, even though technically he didn't count. Next came Talia Jefferson's introduction. She rose deliberately, clutching a small index card displaying her name in purple ink. Talia was known as one of the quieter students in class. She was intelligent but preferred not to raise her hand simply to speak. She surveyed the room, making no direct eye contact, and stated distinctly, "My mom works at NASA." A pause followed. Then came quiet chuckles, escalating into laughter, not a sudden outburst, but a wave that grew stronger as confused and amused glances circulated. "Wait, NASA?" Someone called from the rear. "You mean like the space agency?" Another voice whispered, perhaps a little too loudly. Even Ms. Lawson seemed surprised. She didn't laugh. Instead, her eyebrows rose a little, as if she found it difficult to accept. Talia blinked deliberately, remaining silent and still. She didn't shout. She didn't flee. She simply stood, her expression composed, her hands unwavering. "Yes," she confirmed, stating that she works at NASA and is a systems engineer. The word seemed out of place. Ms. Lawson, positioned close to the board, offered a strained smile, signaling a transition to the next item. "Well, thank you, Talia," she said, already looking over her clipboard. Next, it was Owen's turn. Talia resumed her seat, disregarding the laughter and the subtle gestures. Her fingers tightened around the bottom of her shirt. Her expression remained composed, though her cheeks felt flushed. Owen began to discuss his dad's plumbing business, but Talia registered very little of what he said. She was certain they didn't accept her story, not a single one of them, not even the teacher. They found the task unbelievable, but even more so, they doubted the individual presenting it. A girl with deep brown skin, her tight braids secured with a soft pink scrunchie. She carried a hand-me-down backpack with a broken zipper. Her shoes were well worn, and she didn't use elaborate language or speak with great volume. Therefore, when she mentioned NASA, it sounded to them like a fantasy, like a game. During Owen's presentation, a piece of paper was passed to her desk. A boy named Theo leaned towards her and asked if she cleaned the bathrooms or something. Talia remained silent. She didn't cry, not at that moment. As the bell signaled the end of class and students scrambled for their backpacks, she remained seated, her gaze fixed on the classroom door. She had never before wished her mom held a different position, one that was simpler to discuss, one that didn't invite curious glances. Nevertheless, even then, she held onto the conviction that it was important. Her mom had once shared with her that some truths are too profound for limited understanding. One simply allows them to mature. Talia exited that classroom with her head held high, despite a knot in her stomach. She felt no personal shame. Her concern was for those around her. However, she was unaware that the learning experience wasn't complete. This applied to her classmates and to Ms. Lawson as well. The Jefferson House was located close to a peaceful road in Mobile, Alabama. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was neat, painted a light yellow with green shutters. It was the sort of place where the porch light was consistently illuminated before nightfall, and the screen door made a slight creak upon entry. Talia entered through that door at a slower pace than normal. Removing her sneakers, she dropped her backpack close to the staircase and went directly to the kitchen. The aroma of garlic and onions indicated her mom had arrived home earlier than usual. Dr. Renee Jefferson was at the stove, stirring something in a large red pot. She didn't immediately acknowledge her. "You're late," she stated, not unkindly, simply observing it. Talia selected a chair and sat down. "Had to remain behind to clean the desks," she murmured. Renee turned, observed her daughter's expression, and adjusted the flame. Talia remained silent for a moment. Her hands rested in her lap, nervously playing with the sleeves of her hoodie. She appeared eager to speak, but struggled to begin. "We laughed," Talia said at last. Renee understood immediately who she meant. She drew out the chair opposite her daughter and sat. There were no outbursts, no displays of shock or fear. "Why? I informed them that you were employed at NASA." Renee gave a barely perceptible nod, "and they didn't believe you." One kid suggested you might have cleaned the bathrooms. Renee took a shallow breath, a momentary pause to compose herself. And what was your response? You didn't offer one. Ms. Lawson quickly moved on, seemingly avoiding the issue. That action caused Renee's eyebrows to twitch almost imperceptibly, but she maintained a level tone. Do you think you said something incorrect? Talia glanced up sharply. No. Don't accept their lack of understanding as your fault. They laughed, and that's their responsibility, not yours. A moment of silence followed as the bubbling from the pot filled the space. Outside, a dog barked twice and then stopped. You know, Renee said, rising to stir the food again, when I first told people I wanted to work in aerospace, my high school guidance counselor told me to be more realistic. Said I should consider secretarial work. Talia looked up, eyes wide. That occurred in 1998. I didn't engage in an argument with her. I simply ceased visiting her office. Did it cause pain? Renee extinguished the stove and turned to her daughter. Yes, but also ignited a spark. I wasn't feeling anger towards her. I was resolved not to allow her to dictate who I could be. Talia smiled. Just a little. She appreciated that her mom consistently found a way to speak honestly, but not in a sensationalized way. There was resilience in her composure. You know, I could attend your class, Renee mentioned casually. Parent days are this Friday, correct? Talia blinked. You do that? She asked. I get the day off anyway, and it might be fun. Renee replied, but what would you wear? Talia's eyes lit up. Renee grinned. I was thinking maybe my NASA badge and that black blazer you hate. Talia responded, okay, yeah, do that. They both laughed then, a real, from-the-belly kind of laughter. The air in the kitchen felt lighter. Renee served them both bowls of stew and set them on the table. While they ate, she shared stories with Talia about her first job interview and the time she accidentally spilled coffee on a flight simulator keyboard. The stories made Talia giggle, and she no longer felt small. She felt lucky. Remember, Renee said as they finished, you don't owe anyone proof. But if the moment comes when you feel like showing them, just know I've got your back. Talia nodded slowly, cheeks full of food and her badge. Renee smirked that too. She wasn't intending to simply make a statement. She aimed to transform the atmosphere of the room. Talia hadn't realized this yet. Friday arrived sooner than Talia anticipated. Throughout the entire week, rumors continued to circulate within the classroom, much like dust in sunlight. Several students attempted apologies through hesitant gestures. One offered her a crushed fruit snack. Another quietly said, I was just joking. However, the majority behaved as if nothing had occurred. This suited Talia just fine. She hadn't forgotten. As the morning bell signaled the start of the day, the classroom was filled with excited energy. Ms. Lawson had organized the desks in a horseshoe shape, creating space for parents to be seated and present. She wore a purple blouse and had placed a tray of sugar cookies, clearly purchased from a grocery store, as a somewhat feeble attempt to create a celebratory atmosphere. Talia was positioned near the center, her backpack carefully placed beneath her chair. She felt anxious, though not frightened. It was a feeling of anticipation. She had not informed anyone that her mom would be present. The first parents arrived approximately at 9:15. This included a man wearing a mechanic's uniform, a woman in scrubs, and several moms carrying tote bags and Starbucks cups, who greeted with somewhat overenthusiastic smiles and waves. The presentation commenced, punctuated by applause and gentle laughter. One dad shared a story about repairing a sink that had unexpectedly burst. Another mom recounted her experience of teaching yoga to toddlers. Talia repeatedly looked toward the door. Precisely as Ms. Lawson began introducing the subsequent speaker, the door opened. Dr. Renee Jefferson entered the room. She was wearing the black blazer that Talia found so off-putting, perfectly tailored and crisp. Her NASA Johnson Space Center identification badge hung from a Navy lanyard, paired with black slacks and no jewelry except for a silver watch. Her expression was calm, not smug, not flashy, simply present. The room fell silent instantly. Even the air seemed to still. Ms. Lawson stammered, and Talia stood up, announcing, "This is my mom, Dr. Renee Jefferson." The teacher's eyes widened momentarily before a smile spread across their face. "All right, welcome." They gestured. Would you like to tell us about your work? Renee responded with a courteous nod. Certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'm an aerospace systems engineer at NASA. I work on mission planning, flight systems integration, and operation strategy for our lunar and Mars programs. Several heads turned in the direction of Talia. A few mouths dropped open, and one student quietly whispered, "Whoa." Renee proceeded calmly. Her voice had a measured cadence, clear, smooth, and steady. A significant portion of my work focuses on designing systems that ensure astronauts can travel safely in space. We examine all aspects, from their respiration to the transmission of data back to Earth. She paused, allowing the statement to sink in. I'm not here to impress you, she added, observing the room. I came here because my daughter mentioned she's spoken with you, and some of you expressed doubt about my work. Silence. Talia could hear her own heartbeat. She refused to blink. Renee approached the whiteboard and indicated a printed diagram she had prepared, a genuine schematic from a previous project. You don't need to grasp every detail. That's perfectly acceptable, she stated, addressing the group. But the next time you hear something that seems unbelievable, pause before dismissing it. Because innovation can emerge unexpectedly, she said, then turned to her daughter. And when someone shares a truth with conviction, allow it to remain as it is, don't diminish it. Ms. Lawson cleared her throat. Thank you, Dr. Jefferson. That was very enlightening. Renee smiled and walked over to sit beside Talia, who was trying not to grin. The room proceeded slowly after that. The next parent began their presentation about running a car dealership. There was no laughter, no whispering. And Talia, she sat up straighter than she ever had before. She didn't look around for affirmation. She didn't require it. At that moment, her truth resonated strongly, accessible to all present. However, many failed to recognize that the woman they had just encountered hadn't always experienced being heard. Her journey to NASA encompassed countless instances mirroring this one. Prior to becoming Dr. Renee Jefferson, she was simply Renee Lewis, a slender teenager with oversized glasses and notebooks filled with diagrams that held no interest for anyone else in her neighborhood. Growing up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, she lived in a house with a sagging front porch, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. From a young age, she preferred machines to makeup. While other girls enjoyed playing jump rope, Renee constructed small devices from discarded fans and obsolete cassette players. Her uncle once described her as odd, but she viewed that as a positive attribute. At 13, she borrowed a book from the public library about space shuttles and devoured it completely in a single night. By 14, she was independently learning fundamental programming concepts. She rarely discussed this at school. She quickly discovered that expressing a desire to work at NASA would often result in ridicule or dismissal. Her educators didn't encourage her. This wasn't due to a lack of intelligence. Renee consistently earned straight A's across all subjects. Instead, they had formed preconceived notions about her future. You'd be exceptionally organized, one counselor remarked to her. You'd excel as a receptionist. Upon mentioning her intention to apply to a summer program for young engineers at Georgia Tech, her math teacher expressed surprise. He remarked that it was highly competitive and questioned if she was certain about spending the application fee. Despite this, she submitted her application and was accepted. That summer proved transformative. She found herself among peers who approached problem solving in a similar manner, with notebooks brimming with questions and uninhibited curiosity. She returned with a collection of blueprints and a newfound sense of purpose. College presented its own challenges. At Auburn University, she found herself one of just 3 black women within the entire engineering department. During collaborative assignments, she frequently was asked to record notes rather than work on calculations. Instructors continued to mispronounce her name, even after 3 semesters had passed. Despite these difficulties, she remained steadfast, consistently attending classes. Renee supported herself by working evenings at a diner close to campus and providing tutoring services to high school students on weekends. There were moments when she contemplated abandoning her studies. It wasn't a matter of her inability to manage the workload, The difficulties stem from the draining effort of constantly having to demonstrate her place. During one spring, following a successful thermodynamics midterm, she overheard two classmates speaking privately behind her. One suggested she must have received assistance, and the other speculated she may have copied from another student. Instead of confronting them, she didn't shed tears. She simply returned home, opened her textbook, and began preparing for the upcoming finals. By the semester's conclusion, she achieved the top rank within her department. It was an unspoken understanding amongst them, but they recognized it. Following graduation, she completed an internship at Lockheed Martin. Subsequently, she submitted an application to NASA, which she considered a long shot. However, her qualifications were undeniable. The acceptance call arrived in March while she was in a laundromat, surrounded by wet towels and with only one dryer operational. Her mother wept on the phone for a full 5 minutes. From there, the substantial effort commenced. The meetings, the designs, the late nights, the subtle glances in conference rooms, the moments where she had to repeat herself 3 times to be heard. But she persisted in voicing her thoughts, because whenever she worked at a console or drafted a fresh concept, she recalled a younger version of herself who only needed one person to believe it was achievable. Now, as she entered her daughter's 5th grade classroom, the badge swaying from her neck, she represented more than just herself. She stood for every girl who had ever been told, "People like you don't do that." However, this wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about establishing something new in her daughter, a foundation that couldn't be undermined. The following Monday, subtle changes were noticeable, not in a dramatic fashion, but through small shifts. The shift was subtle, something you'd only perceive if you were paying close attention. When Talia entered class, she anticipated no special welcome, and none arrived, but the atmosphere felt different. People didn't visibly react when she spoke. Theo didn't whisper. In fact, he completely avoided looking at her. During recess, 2 girls, Kennedy and Samira, approached her near the jungle gym. They stood nearby, uncomfortably, shifting their weight. "My mom said your mom's speech was really something," Kennedy said, chewing her bottom lip. "She seemed intelligent, genuinely so." "She is," Talia answered promptly. Samira concurred. "I researched NASA after school," she explained. "It's quite interesting." That was their brief exchange. Yet they remained. And for the first time all year, the 3 of them settled on the bench and discussed a topic beyond snack trades or slime videos. Later that day, Ms. Lawson spoke privately with Talia as the class prepared to leave. "I wanted to say something," she began, her voice softer than normal. "Regarding last week," Talia looked up, attentive. "I should have managed that situation differently," Ms. Lawson continued. "I ought to have asked more questions, rather than proceeding so quickly. I apologize." Talia wasn't certain how to respond. She rarely encountered adults offering apologies in that manner. She nodded once, deliberately. That was sufficient for the present, though not everyone experienced a change of perspective. Certain children still spoke in hushed tones, but they did so with greater discretion. Some observed her with an expectation of failure, seemingly needing her to falter to reaffirm their own perspectives. One boy, Dean, would quietly say NASA kid whenever she passed, as if attempting to diminish her accomplishments. Talia remained composed. She did not react defensively or retreat. Instead, she continued her efforts. She engaged more frequently in class, volunteering answers even when uncertain of the correctness. Now, even making mistakes didn't intimidate her, not as it once had. One afternoon during group work, she overheard a classmate say, "She thinks she's better than us." Talia looked up calmly and replied, "No, I just know I belong here." No further debate followed. At home, Renee observed the change as well. Talia spoke more at dinner, sharing small details about her day without needing to be prompted repeatedly. And she began drawing again, shifting away from cartoons towards diagrams, similar to those her mother created. Rockets, helmets, star maps, and pencil. One evening, Renee discovered a post-it note affixed to the fridge. It stated, "I'm going to work there too, love, Talia." She left it untouched for 3 days. However, This wasn't solely about demonstrating assurance. A more profound shift had occurred within Talia. It was no longer a matter of disproving anyone. It was about embracing her own authenticity, recognizing truth regardless of criticism. During gym class, when the teacher requested they write down a goal not related to sports, Talia wrote, "Engineer, space missions just like my mom." When the teacher announced it, there were no laughs. The class simply listened. However, at home, a different feeling arose. It was a still moment shared between mother and daughter, solidifying all they had experienced. It was Friday night again. A full week had passed since Parent Day, and the house was filled with the aroma of Renee's renowned lemon chicken. Talia sat at the kitchen table, sketching a new design, a rotating satellite with solar panels shaped like flower petals. She worked quietly, pausing occasionally to erase or examine an angle. Renee watched from the sink, carefully drying a dish. The focused way her daughter drew, with her tongue slightly pressed against her upper lip, brought back memories of herself at 12, always constructing something in her mind. "Would you like to take a break?" Renee asked softly. Talia looked up. "Almost finished." Renee smiled, resting against the counter. "You've been working on that for 2 hours." Talia replied, "I know, I just wanted to look right." She completed the final line and showed the paper to her mom. Renee approached and examined it closely. "Explain it to me." Talia said, "Well, it's a satellite, but instead of keeping all the panels flat, they open up like this." She demonstrated the shape with her hands. "So it can collect more energy when it turns, depending on the angle of the sun." Renee acknowledged with a nod, clearly impressed. "That's a clever approach. Where did that idea originate?" Talia replied, "I'm not entirely sure. I had been considering sunflowers earlier, observing how they track the sun's movement. The concept simply arose." Renee took a seat next to her, carefully placing the paper on the table. "You know what I appreciate most about that idea?" she inquired. "What?" Renee responded. "You weren't attempting to make a favorable impression. You were simply striving to resolve an issue." Talia glanced at the drawing once more. "Yes, I suppose so." They remained there for a moment in quiet contemplation. A comfortable silence settled. Then Talia spoke again, her voice gentler. "Do you think they truly believed me?" "After you left," Renee placed her hand on the table. "Some did, some still don't. That's not something you can always manage. So what is the solution? You continue to reappear. That's the challenging aspect. Not a single time, but repeatedly. You articulate the truth, even when it seems as though nobody listens." Talia considered that as you did. Renee offered a gentle smile, similar to the one I still offer. "Was it always this difficult for you?" Renee reclined in the chair, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes more so, but I stopped expecting it to become simple." Talia regarded her mother, seeing her not only as a parent, but as an individual. Someone who had overcome obstacles she hadn't even been aware of. Someone who possessed quiet strength without needing external validation. "I used to wish you had a conventional job." Renee laughed, something straightforward to describe. Talia observed her mother's reaction, recognizing the discomfort when people inquired. "Now, I find it quite admirable, truly admirable." Renee reached out and gently tucked one of her daughter's braids behind her ear. "I'm proud of you, she said. Not because of what you said in class, but because you said it anyway." Talia felt a warmth in her chest, not just pride, but relief. A weight she hadn't noticed until it started to lift. "I didn't think you were going to come that day," she admitted. Renee raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" she asked. "I thought maybe you'd think it wasn't worth it." Renee hesitated. Then she moved nearer, speaking with a resolute and unwavering tone. "Anything that impacts your self-perception is always deserving of support." Little needed to be said after that. Talia rose and proceeded to the refrigerator, took a magnet, and attached her artwork directly beside the grocery list. Renee observed her, feeling a sense of quiet contentment. Not every learning experience warranted recognition. Some simply existed, perceptible only to those who had rightfully gained them. There remained one final point to share, not directed at Talia, but for those still discovering what excellence resembles. The following week, during the morning announcements, Ms. Lawson took an unanticipated action. She presented a student submission from the Career Dreams bulletin board and read it aloud to the class. This one is from Talia Jefferson, she announced. She wrote, I want to build machines that will reach places no person has ever reached because someone must discover how to get us there, and I believe I can. There was no laughter this time, only silence. Several students turned to observe her, not with incredulity, but with something approaching respect. Talia sat at her desk, serene and concentrated, sketching miniature gears in the borders of her notebook. She didn't require a glance upward, nor did she need the room to applaud. That wasn't the focus, as this narrative was never centered on recognition. It concerned honesty, about maintaining conviction when others expressed doubt, about the significance of speaking clearly, not noisily. However, the individuals in that classroom had observed something unexpected. A woman with qualifications, certainly. Beyond that, she was a woman with a clear sense of self, someone who didn't require authorization to express herself, and a daughter who witnessed her interspaces devoid of faith and yet infused them with strength. Renee didn't need to speak loudly. She didn't need to detail her achievements. Her presence was sufficient. However, it was Talia who bore the burden of that day. She endured the flames of mockery, remained within them, and emerged stronger. It can be challenging to express self-belief, particularly when facing a lack of external validation. The core message extends beyond the nature of a parent's profession or the perceived grandeur of their role. It centers on the lessons we impart to our children, not through spoken words, but through demonstrable actions. Affirming your child instills resilience. Consistently supporting them cultivates bravery. Even a brief moment in a crowded room, standing near them, demonstrates what it truly means to be heard. When a child experiences being seen, not only by a teacher or a classmate, but by the wider world, they cease to diminish their presence. They stop doubting themselves. They begin to carry themselves with the confidence of someone who has something significant to contribute. Because they do. Talia no longer needed to persuade anyone. She wasn't waiting for the class to accept her. She had already moved forward, now concentrating on what she thought achievable. This is what makes narratives like hers significant. Because for each child who has been ridiculed, overlooked, or interrupted, there's another opportunity awaiting. A moment when the door opens, when the badge is displayed, when silence transforms into respect, and it remains with them. At the conclusion of the school year, when the class created their memory book, a page was designated most likely to. Beneath Talia's photograph, a message read, seemingly with the intention of sending something into space. She reacted with a smile, not due to the coolness of the statement, but because this time it appeared to be genuine. Therefore, the next time a child expresses a significant aspiration, refrain from immediate skepticism. Avoid limiting their potential to your current understanding. Allow them to surpass your expectations. And for parents observing this, be present, even when it feels challenging, particularly when it's truly important. Vocalize your belief in them. For more stories like this, please subscribe. These are stories that highlight true strength.